You should always be on your guard on so-called normal days. These are the times when you may find yourself in the shadows, get into trouble, or find yourself in sixth place. This is similar to the old idea of avoiding quiet people, as they are usually wild at heart. Both of these wisdoms came to me, Alan Webb, to enlighten me. I married my childhood sweetheart Ellie almost immediately after we both graduated from university and found good jobs. I as a teacher at a local junior school, and Ellie as a nurse at a local private hospital. Good jobs with a future and security. With a steady, almost guaranteed income, the banks didn't hesitate to give us the money for our first house. Soon the children came along. James, now 14, and Elaine, now 19, were the pride of our lives. They seemed to have a brilliant future ahead of them. They had a steady circle of close friends, did well in school, and fought with each other enough that Ellie and I laughed reservedly at their antics on more than one occasion. The relationship between Ellie and me, while not particularly passionate, was stable. We fought occasionally, mostly about the children. She always seemed very protective of them and fought when I laid down the law regarding the various issues that inevitably arise when raising two children. She would argue up to a certain point and then seem to reach some point within herself where she would stop and quickly change the subject. This had become the norm. The thread of a peaceful existence began to unravel one Thursday. It was lunchtime in the staff room. I taught at the junior high school, but it was attached to the large high school campus. This meant that the junior high teachers would meet and eat lunch in the common staff room with the senior teachers, many of whom I had managed to become friends with. It was during this lunch, one of the few times I could enjoy it without being on playground duty or hunched over a stack of marks, that Pat Collins, head of the high school science department, suggested a project to me. "Hey Al, could you help a team of my Year 12 students test out some spiffy new equipment?" Always willing to help, but wary of possible shenanigans, I replied. "Sure, Pat. You're testing the size of the human brain, and you want to calibrate the machine for the largest extreme first?" He grinned. "No, nothing that simple. We've been loaned a simple DNA sampling device from the university. It's specifically for a team of 12th graders who have been identified by the Scouts as honors students and given accelerated admission to the university's science course next year. We're pretty privileged since this is the first time something like this has happened, at least to my knowledge." "Good," I replied. "But why do you need my help?" At this, my interest piqued. "Well, we need people we can test DNA samples on. For child safety reasons, we can't use any of the students or staff here for the tests. We need random people who can't be traced by the team or the university. Maybe you can help? You can't tell me who the test subjects are, but one of them must be related to the parents, and one must not. A team of science students will have to determine with DNA which one is which. I can use my children, but then I might accidentally give clues to the students. All it takes is 3 strands of hair, one from a parent, one from a related child, and one from an unrelated child. Do you agree?" He looked at me expectantly as I hesitated. "You will be doing this group of students a huge favor. Opportunities like this don't come along every day." "Why not?" I replied. I already knew that I would be using my own children as test subjects, but I wasn't about to tell Pat. He gave me special containers that ensured no cross-contamination of the samples would occur. "Why are you giving me 6 containers?" I asked. "Just in case you spoil any of the samples," he replied. "Right. Like junior high school teachers don't know anything, right?" replied I. It was an ongoing squabble between 2 good friends. Thursday evening was perfect for sampling. Ellie wasn't home as she had a late shift. I can only imagine how she would react to her children being used in a science experiment. Elaine also had a study friend over for the night. It was Elaine's longtime friend, Patsy Jefferson. We had known her parents, John and Shelley, since our college days and often met them socially. I enjoyed socializing with Shelley as she was an open and good-natured woman. John, her husband, although pleasant and talkative, always seemed a bit reserved. I often caught a strange look in his eyes. I couldn't understand what it was, but there was a kind of smugness in it, like he knew something I didn't. But hey, everyone is different, and Ellie liked being around them. The hair parting was easier than I thought it would be. Obviously, mine was the easiest, and getting a strand of Elaine's hair was as simple as going to the bathroom and grabbing one of the combs in her closet. We each had our own bathroom cabinet, and Elaine always used her brush, as did Ellie. Patsy's hairbrush ended up in my lap by pure coincidence. The two girls were frolicking in the living room during a study break when Patsy fell near the dining room table and got her shoulder-length hair caught on one of the chairs. Elaine rolled on the floor with laughter as Patsy tried to untangle the tangle in all the nooks and crannies of the chair. She finally succeeded, but a few small tufts of her hair remained on the chair. Bingo, sample number 3 complete. Now I went to James's bedroom and removed one of the hairs from his pillow. Of course, he didn't know what I was doing as he was listening to music in the room at the time. I now had 4 samples, mine, 2 related, Elaine and James, and 1 unrelated, Patsy. I had 2 empty containers left, and so as not to spoil the other samples, I included one of Ellie's hairs, again from her comb, for fun. This should be fun. I labeled them very scientifically, AE, and wrote down whose hairs they were. A was mine, B and C were Elaine's and James', D was Patsy's, and E was Ellie's. I couldn't wait to see the results. It would certainly test the team for accuracy and give them valuable diagnostic experience before going to university. Needless to say, the next day I gave the samples to Pat. He seemed surprised to have 2 extra samples, but noted that it would make the testing more realistic. Since it was Friday, I wasn't expecting any results anytime soon, so I just continued with my normal routine for the next week. Once again in the staff room, Pat approached me. "Hey Al, the team got the results back. They're thrilled." The mentors from the university were very impressed with the way they conducted the session and the way the DNA instrument worked in their relatively untrained hands. I can tell this team of students have a brilliant future in science next year. It was a good move to give them 5 samples. It really made them mess around for a while. Anyway, here's a report of the results. I don't want to know who they are or where they're from, but thanks again. I waited until I got home to open the brown envelope, since I had all day to prepare for my 6th grade lesson. The report was pretty straightforward. First, it detailed the method used to determine the DNA sequences of each sample. This was followed by a simple table illustrating the relatedness between the samples. It looked as follows. A is not related to any of the other samples. E is related to samples B and C. D is related to samples B and C. E is not related to sample D. It then said that the results had been carefully checked by the university's DNA laboratory and that the likelihood of error was extremely small. This was followed by praise for the way the Year 12 students had carried out the work and congratulations on the high degree of accuracy they had achieved. The letter said, "The results are absolutely correct in all aspects." I realized this only after rereading the report. My hands shook as I realized the implications of the results. Yes, a royal kick in the rear. This meant that I, sample A, was not related to my own children, samples B and C. That couldn't be true. I was their father. But Ellie was related to them. What about Patsy? How could she be related to Elaine and James? The truth of these results was too much to face. My mind switched from one thought to another, unwilling to dwell on one undeniable fact. I had been a cuckold my entire married life. "No, no, 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 Ellie, no!" I shouted to the empty house. No one was home, thankfully. The empty house suddenly seemed to close around me as I spun on the spot and froze on the kitchen floor. "Daddy? Daddy, are you okay? What happened?" It was Elaine's voice that attacked my dead brain and woke me up. "I think so," I mumbled. My eyes were still partially closed, and all I could see was a blurry image of my daughter's face, clearly upset. My daughter, Elaine, or was she? The horrible realization surfaced again, and I sat up abruptly and shook my head to chase away the drowsiness. Running my hand through my hair, I felt a lump form in the place of my skull that had cushioned my fall to the floor. "Ouch!" I exclaimed, as my hand found itself covered in blood. Elaine was at my side in a flash with a tissue and ice and cool water. I mumbled words of thanks, sipping the water and applying the ice to the wound. "I'm sorry," I said. "I don't know what happened. I was just reading this report, and then I realized you were calling my name. I must have slipped or something. I think I'll be fine in a minute. I'm going to go to my room and get some rest. James and your mom will be home soon. Do you think you can watch dinner?" "Sure, Dad," Elaine replied. "You know, you gave me quite a scare. I thought you were having a heart attack or something. Resuscitation was supposed to be my next thing." All of high school gym class suddenly made sense, she grinned. "I love you. Now go get some rest." Those words hit my heart harder than a heart attack. Elaine was my daughter, but she wasn't. I loved her very much and she loved me as her father. Only I wasn't her father. I was just a dumbass who paid for her upbringing, held her when she cried, listened to her crazy teenage whining and tantrums, changed her diapers in the middle of the night, kissed her on the cheek as she left for school every morning. I wasn't her father. A DNA test had shown me that, but the result wasn't a black eye but a broken heart. The chaise lounge chair in the living room cushioned my fall, and I sank into it to sit and think. To sit and think. Think about what? Thinking about the fact that Ellie had cheated on me not once, but twice. If twice, how many more times? The two apparent cheats happened a few years apart, so what happened in between, either before or after? What about now? Is it really still happening now? How could Ellie do this? She was my wife, my love, my partner. We did everything together. Others often remarked what a great partnership we had or seemed to have. We hardly ever fought. How? How? These words I involuntarily repeated aloud as I sat there. I hadn't noticed that Elaine had come down to the den with a cup of coffee for me. "I don't know how either, Daddy," she said, thinking the question was addressed to her. "I don't see anything you could trip over, and the floor is dry, so you didn't slip on anything. By the way, I found this. You must have read it on your way to the kitchen. Some kind of science report. You really should make your mark sitting at the table, Daddy." Swearing, she handed me a coffee. God bless her, and a crumpled report, damn her. "Thanks for both, Lainey," I replied, using my pet name for her whenever she scolded me for anything. She smiled and left the room to continue with dinner. I really needed to get a grip on myself until I could apply logic to the situation and check out what was involved. If I kept this up and some mistake was made, I would have already ruined my relationship with Ellie and the kids. My kids? Ellie clearly cheated on me with John Jefferson, and not just once, but at least twice. My hands were starting to shake. I was on edge again. I needed to get my emotions and outward behavior under control immediately. Fortunately, as a teacher, I was used to doing both, especially when dealing with parents who brought their children into my classrooms every year. By the time I had finished my coffee and the ice had started to run down my face, I had already had everything laid out. And just in time, James and Ellie walked through the door. "Are you okay, Dad?" James asked. "Getting old man? Maybe we should get a wheelchair," he joked, examining the wound on his head. "That must hurt," he joked again, retiring to his room. "What's wrong, Al?" asked Ellie, also examining the wound from a purely medical standpoint. "It doesn't need stitches, but you'll have to ice it for a while. What was Elaine thinking, using one of my good tea towels for it? I'll have to splash it on and blot it to get the blood off. I'll be back in a minute with another napkin and new ice." With those words, she removed herself and busied herself with a new bandage. I was proud of myself. I held myself together, but every time she touched the wound, I recoiled slightly, not from the pain, but from the betrayal that now seemed obvious to me. Of course, Ellie thought it was from the pain. "Don't be such a fool." She purred as I tried to move away from every touch. "Come upstairs for dinner. I need to take a shower." Elaine was busy cooking for her poor wounded father. She laughed. I didn't laugh as I climbed the stairs to sit at the table with my family. My family? Ha! That lie flavored all my thoughts. I almost passed out. Thankfully, everyone attributed my strange behavior to my recent fall, and took it all in stride. Later, as I headed to bed, I realized that I had survived my first day of cheating. I could do this. As a teacher, I had a few days a year that could be considered sick days. Because of the high stress of teaching, these days could also be used as mental health days. The benefits of working in a union. I decided to meet with the associate principal and arrange a week's break from teaching. She knew my track record and instinctively realized that my request was for something serious. This is a bit sudden, Al. Is there something I should know about? She paused expectantly. I'd rather not talk right now, boss. I just need some time alone at home to sort out some serious matters. In my current state of mind, I'm not doing any of my students a favor. Rest easy, Al. I know your work ethic and I know you're not just hobbling around. I hope your vacation is good for you. Now get going. I will find an aide for your class for this week. Just leave all your plans for your absence on the teacher's desk. This weekend was surreal. I maintained normal conversation around the house, but managed to spend as much time away from Ellie as possible, picturing one-yard work after another that just had to be done. The hardest part was mealtime, always a time of light family banter, and I had to be very focused on my contribution to that banter. I just couldn't look Ellie in the eye. I fake smiled and then continued on. My heart broke over and over as I watched and listened to James and Elaine. It was easy for me to escape at night as I retired early, chalking it up to yard work and recovering from the fall. Ellie didn't seem the least bit bothered by my lack of interest in having fun over the weekend, and maybe it was my paranoid state, but I think she was trying to hide a sigh of relief. Monday morning I went to work as per my usual routine. Ellie had a week of day shifts, so she wouldn't be in during my normal school hours. James was at school as usual, and Elaine had a full school week at university. So basically, I would be at school as usual, and the rest of the family would be at school as usual. Perfect. I had free rein to research whatever I needed to research. My logical teacher brain took over, and soon I had a list of things to check. 1. Check Ellie's personal belongings for anything that could give me answers to the questions: who, when, where, why. 2. Check Ellie's movements while at work. If something was going on, it had to be related to her work. She never had bachelorette parties or any social events alone. 3. Buy a tracking device for Ellie's car. 4. Check John Jefferson's movements. 5. Contact an attorney and detail her options. The first was relatively easy since the house was in my possession. I thoroughly searched everything: Ellie's closet, the bedside table, even the attic. I found nothing incriminating anywhere. There was one strange thing, though. One of the photo albums in the room had been taken out and replaced many times. I only realized this by the absence of the usual dust on one of the albums. I noticed this while sitting in my usual chair and sipping my coffee, pondering where else I should look. Out of curiosity, I pulled a blank album off the shelf. No one else had looked in photo albums, so I wanted to know why this one had been opened so recently. I was overwhelmed by the contents of this album. It was almost a shrine to John. There were pictures of him at university, even a few pictures of him and Ellie in rather intimate poses, obviously while at university. Okay, university is a wild time for most developing adults, but keeping photographic evidence? Thought I. I also remembered that we had promised to be exclusive during our courtship at university. Something wasn't right. There were pictures of him holding Elaine in his arms as an infant. But what made me most sick was the photo of him, Ellie and Elaine in the hospital shortly after Elaine was born. A happy family photo. This was followed chronologically by similar photos with James. This was followed by more happy family photos of them all together in various locations. I noticed that they were mostly places we'd been together, so the pictures must have been taken while I was distracted by something else. I couldn't recall a single photo being taken while I was within earshot or sight. The photos were certainly not on the kitchen table for all to see after the event. All of the photos that were not taken in the usual social situations were taken at a local hospital. Ellie was almost always dressed in hospital clothes, but in some of the pictures she was in a very revealing gown. This was usually a point of pride for me. Ellie had always been attractive, and when dressed neatly, could turn the head of any man over the age of 18, even now. However, there was no pride I felt, only a feeling of utter betrayal. She wasn't dressing up for me. She was impressing John. John the asshole. I could now catch the furtive glances and sly smiles as we met socially. I could almost hear John thinking, "That poor dumb bastard. He has no idea that Ellie and I are having fun of our own accord. He doesn't even know about our two favorite children." At that moment, my mind plunged into some additional universe. It was as if I had detached myself from reality and was now acting out a movie. None of the things I had taken for granted were real. No marriage, no children, no family. It's amazing how quickly a lifelong love for a special person can turn into hate. That's exactly what happened in that alternate universe. I knew I could easily fall into despair and curl up to die, but I knew I wouldn't. I had plans for the future. That single photo album opened the well of my love for Ellie. All the love poured out and was left lying on the floor of the den. I copied all the photos with a scanner and created a password-locked folder on my computer where I kept everything I found. Time to move on to the second item on my list. It was already 11 o'clock, and I knew that Ellie had a lunch break at 12 noon every day. I had plenty of time to drive over to her hospital and check out what she was doing. I brought my camera with a telephoto lens just in case. Parking was easy at this time, and I was very lucky to find a spot near the back of the parking lot. It was out of sight of the front entrance to the hospital, but allowed me to peek around the entrance. At 5 minutes to 12, I saw John enter the hospital. He walked in very confidently, as if he had done it many times before. At 5 minutes to 12, Ellie came out. Nothing special, except for the fact that she was walking hand in hand with John. At that moment, the love I felt for Ellie erupted into intense anger. Anger at her, and anger at John. My camera almost automatically kicked in, taking auto-drive shots as the two lovers walked out of the hospital and towards Ellie's car, which thankfully wasn't next to mine. They kissed as they got into the car and it drove off. I followed them at a safe distance. They didn't expect anyone to be following them, as they didn't change direction or turn around to see if anyone was tailgating. They had gotten away with it for too long for any of them to doubt that they were free to do as they pleased. They were under the impression that poor dumbass me was in school as usual. Why should they have bothered? The car stopped in front of a hotel a short distance from the hospital. It was one of those establishments that catered almost exclusively to hospital patients and their families traveling from out of town. They almost ran out of the car and into the reception area, where it looked like they could go straight to their room. The receptionist simply waved her hand at them, holding out the key. As they disappeared into the elevator, I entered the check-in area and pretended to look around, casually remarking to the receptionist that the last couple seemed to be in a big hurry. Her response cut even deeper into my heart. So deep that it almost pierced my soul, and I was sure I was going to lose my temper and scream and shout obscenities at the world. She replied, "Oh yes, they are regulars here. They rent a room 4 times a week and also have a quick takeaway. Isn't it nice that married couples still do that even after all these years?" My thoughts interrupted her story. Married couples? She should be married to me. The receptionist's voice continued. I've been working here for 15 years, and it's the same thing every week, Monday through Thursday, regular as clockwork. Even when Elsie was pregnant, she and James would come here. They usually stayed for an hour and a half each time. Strangely, they never come here during the school vacations. Now would you like to get a room? No, thanks. I was just looking for places where my company could accommodate the visiting representatives. Thank you. I managed, stumbling, to get out and back to my car. Sure enough, a little over an hour later, the couple was walking lazily to their car, both eating a sandwich. I knew Ellie and could see by the look on her face and the way she was walking, she was definitely having fun. My camera caught it again. all I could do was not jump out of the car and beat the shit out of the asshole and the whore. That's exactly what I thought of them both now. They drove off and I sat stunned in the hotel parking lot. The receptionist saw me and waved hello. She must be on her lunch break now. I guess she was being nice to a potential future client. She approached and asked if I had any more questions about the services the hotel provided. I politely shook my head, thanked her, and left. When I got home, I added the photos to my folder and tackled the next item on my list. And it was still only Monday. I searched the internet and found a small, discreet GPS tracking device that was on sale at a local store. The time was already 2 in the afternoon, so I had plenty of time to buy it and be home by my usual arrival time. $200 later, I had the device and a small instruction manual. I got home by 3:30 and was sitting at the table pretending to do some labeling when Elaine burst through the door. "Hi, Dad. I'm home. I hope there's no more accidents today." She giggled, hiding in her room. The usual afternoon routine began. James showed up closer to 4, and Ellie headed for the shower room. By 5, I was cooking dinner. By 6, everything was ready. And by 6:30, everyone was sitting around the table. There was the usual chatter, gossip, and small talk around the table until it was time to leave and do the night's business. Ellie looked her usual self. Apparently, she had followed her cheating routine for so long that it had all become a regular part of her day. No sign of secret guilt or remorse for her betrayal. I went to bed early, pretending to be overworked because of a particularly difficult class I had this year. My family was aware of these moments and didn't raise an eyebrow at my early departure. It was a restless night that culminated for me in the early morning. Coffee and a quick face wash woke me up enough to set up the tracker in Ellie's car and set up the app on my computer. After calibrating the settings, I made breakfast and got ready like it was a normal school day. By 9 o'clock, I was on my own again to finalize my list. The tracker was simply to confirm Ellie's movements and be a record of her coming and going from the hospital. I didn't need to track John's movements as I already knew what he and Ellie were doing, so that was the 5th item. A Google search for local divorce attorneys opened my eyes. There were a great multitude of them. I picked one at random and called to see if an appointment was available today. It was. At 11, I sat nervously in a small reception area with a conservatively dressed receptionist typing away on a computer keyboard. He called me in at 11:15 and led me into an office that could only be described as a relic of a bygone era, with polished wood and floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with leather-bound books. The smell was incredible. The room just oozed knowledge and history. "Hello, Mr. Webb. May I call you Al?" Before I could mutter a response, she continued. "I'm Jane Lober, a divorce attorney. How can I help you, Al?" I regrouped my thoughts and just laid out everything I'd experienced over the past few days. I didn't realize it right away, but tears flowed uncontrollably down my face. For the first time, I acknowledged out loud what was happening to me. For the first time, I was talking about it with someone. Jane didn't let go of the tissues she seemed to have in bulk as she took notes. Once in a while, she would only utter a or okay as I told my story. After I finished, there was an awkward pause. I blew my nose while Jane seemed to reread her notes. "Well, Al, that's not a bad story. I assume you have proof of all this?" asked Jane. The way she looked at me with her head down and her eyes above the top rim of her reading glasses reminded me of my high school days in the principal's office. I listed the photographic evidence I had managed to get my hands on so far. I didn't bother telling Jane about the GPS tracker for fear she would tell me it was illegal and inadmissible in court. "Okay," Jane said. "It's pretty clear that you have grounds to sue John for back child support for all those years. You can also sue him for alienation of affection, but to do that you'd have to prove that he somehow coerced Ellie into a relationship. From what you've told me, that seems unlikely. As for you and Ellie, from what you have told me, divorce is the future. However, you must realize that, according to the law, it is not illegal to have affairs. The promises you made at your wedding are null and void. If you divorce, you will be treated as equal partners. Your wife's cheating will not affect the financial outcome of the affair. Since you both work and your incomes will be the same, child support issues will be neutralized. Elaine is 19 now, and she's not part of the formula anyway. James is a different story, and depending on how the residency issue is handled, it will affect the financial outcome. The value of the house will be split 70 to 30% in favor of James's guardian. Any cash and other assets will be divided according to the court order. This is not an easy process. Are you sure this is the path you want to take? Again, she was looking at me over her glasses. I paused to remember everything I'd learned over the past few days. The DNA results, the love photo album, the hotel. Yes, definitely, I replied. Well, good. I'll prepare all the necessary papers, and by Thursday they'll be ready to be signed. Once signed, all that's left to do is decide when you want Ellie and John to be served. Fax, text, or email all the necessary financial information in this brochure to my secretary. I'll see you Thursday, Al. Don't do anything stupid or illegal, and we'll start the process. She stood up and headed for the door. Before I knew it, I was back in the reception area and saw 3 other people waiting nervously as well. At least I'm not alone, I thought. But that was wrong. I was desperately alone. Who could I trust? Ellie? She had always been my trusted confidant in times of need. Elaine? James? How could I so cruelly destroy their faith and trust? It would hurt them as much, if not more, than it hurt me. What about John's family? Patsy and her mom, Shelley, would be devastated to hear about Allie and John's adventures. Doubts began to crack in my earlier resolve. Could I really hurt so many people? If I did nothing, the only person hurt would be me. Would I be able to live with that? I returned home and found myself in my room again, pondering. To act or not to act? That was the question. I smiled grudgingly, remembering the Shakespearean connection. There wasn't much, if anything, of value to be happy about in this whole situation. I needed a drink. Not a fan of drinking alone, I found the company of a large glass of red wine strangely comforting. Was that really the only comfort I could get from a bottle of wine? It was a downward spiral, and I knew it. I set the bottle down, but left the glass behind. It took 2 hours, until 3 in the afternoon to be exact, before I finished my glass of wine and decided what I was going to do. I covered up my lonely drinking addiction and started dinner before the day's arrivals began. Ellie, with her usual cheerful greeting, rushed off to her room to shower, followed by James and Ellie. "James, don't leave your school bag in my car, please," Ellie shouted, heading into our bathroom. Of course, thought I. Ellie always takes a shower as soon as she gets home from work. Her excuse was that she didn't want to spread the nasty bugs from the hospital to us poor innocent family members. I now knew for sure that it was to cover up any evidence of their occupation. And the name James. That was the name John had used at the hotel. These revelations only strengthened my resolve. I knew what I had to do. The next morning I got up early. I went straight to Ellie's car and dismantled the GPS tracker. I didn't need it anymore. Yesterday's data indicated that Ellie was following the same pattern. I also fiddled with the car's electrics, so I knew it wouldn't start. Back in the kitchen shortly after, I made breakfast as usual and went about my usual morning routine. "Come on, James," Ellie shouted. "We have to get going. I have to be at work on time." My thoughts scattered. You really want to meet your second husband, I thought bitterly. They both disappeared into the garage as usual, but mysteriously the car wouldn't start. "Al, the car won't start. Can't you come over and take a look at it?" pleaded Ellie. I headed downstairs, not particularly in a hurry. Lifting the hood, I pretended to push through the various wires while simultaneously telling Ellie, "Try it now," or "What about now?" "Sorry, Elle. It looks like you and James are taking the bus today. I could drive you, but I have a meeting before school today," I lied. Ellie wasn't happy, but she knew that if she didn't start the 5-minute walk to the bus stop now, she would have to wait another 30 minutes. James wasn't impressed either. Riding the bus to school wasn't cool at all. At least the bus stopped right in front of both stops, so the other end of the journey was relatively painless. They set off on their journey, grumbling. James, because of the uncool way to get to school, and Ellie, though she didn't say anything, was probably thinking about missing her usual cheating fun with the asshole. How could they get to their love shack if Ellie didn't have a car? Well, tough luck for her, thought I. I went back to the house, saw Elaine off, and cleaned myself up. I had someone to meet. Shelley was extremely surprised to see that I was the one who rang the doorbell at 9:30. Al, what a surprise. Aren't you supposed to be at school? She then laughed at what she had just said. Listen to me. I sound like a school mom checking up on a truant teenager. I'm sorry. Come on in. Where's Ellie? She was totally confused by the whole visit, but acted very gracious. We made our way to the backyard where our families had spent many a time enjoying barbecue and drinks. Do you want coffee? She asked as I settled into a chair on the patio. Sure, thanks. She soon appeared with 2 mugs that were steaming and placed them on the small table between our chairs. Now, Al, fess up. Why are you here on a school day and without Ellie? She could tell this didn't bode well. Women and their intuition. Shelley, what I'm about to say isn't very pretty. I've been wondering for a long time if I should even say anything to you, but you know me. I believe in doing the right thing. As I spoke, Shelley grew paler and paler, but to her credit, she didn't interrupt. I'm not going to sugarcoat what I have to say, Shelley, so let's get started. I recounted what I'd learned, as I'd also learned about the current relationship between Ally and John. She stopped suddenly and waving her arms, rushed away, wailing and crying. She must have felt very ashamed, for she got up and disappeared into the house. She soon reappeared with a huge box of napkins, 2 bottles of red wine, and 2 large glasses. Screw the coffee, Al, I need this. The second bottle is for you, but if you don't drink it, I will. Take your pick. I took the glass and filled the red liquid with hers and mine. Now tell me again what those bastards did. I again detailed everything I knew. That's it, she whispered. That lying, cheating bastard is toast. The divorce papers will be ready today. She went back into the house, and I saw that she was calling someone. When she came out, she said, My high school friend is a divorce attorney. She's very busy, but she'll see me today at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I may need copies of that photographic evidence you have. Shelley looked at me with red, puffy eyes. I don't understand, Al. Why did you see me first and then burn Ellie? I looked at her with sympathy. I knew what she was going through. I was going to shell. I was overwhelmed with so much hatred that I wanted it immediately. Shock and awe was supposed to be my method of revenge, but I doubted whether to do anything. The pain this was causing you, me, and soon our children was too much for me to bear. No, you better deal with John first, get what's owed to you, and then I'll deal with that asshole. I didn't want to sue him for everything I could and leave you and Patsy with nothing. That wouldn't have been right. I paused and saw that the logic of her reasoning was making sense. Oh, Al, you've always been a Boy Scout. How could Ellie do this to you, and John do this to me and Patsy, and for so long? You must feel awful as shit. I know how I feel. At that, she walked over to my chair and hugged me tightly. We're both going to need sympathetic shoulders to cry on while we go through this. The hug was friendly, warm. We both sat hugging each other and cried uncontrollably, tucked into each other's shoulders. I clearly realized that this was the first sympathetic human contact I had experienced since this whole mess started. And it felt good. The wine was forgotten as we sank into close contact. We both needed it. I don't know how long we stayed like that, but eventually we naturally drifted apart. I'll deal with Patsy, Shelley said. I won't give her all the details about who John was having fun with behind our backs, but I'll give her enough information to make it clear. There's no doubt about his years of infidelity. I won't jeopardize your plans and insinuate to Ellie that I know he's been doing it with her. That should be enough to make her feel what uncertainty and irritation feels like. I left Shelley's house with much more confidence that I had a plan. Let Shelley deal with John first, get her share of their joint property and the alimony paid in advance, without, if possible, alerting anyone about who he's cheating with. This should also give me time to get my affairs in order, so to speak. Attorney Shelley certainly knew her business. The next day, John was served with a summons at work, and very publicly at that. His co-workers were just getting ready for a meeting when a court representative called him out very loudly. Perhaps he shouldn't have done it, but after he announced, "You are being served," he added, "Your wife cannot live with a man who had a long-term affair with another married woman who had 2 children with you." Amid sighs and utter chaos of noise, the serving man disappeared. He was well paid to add that extra tidbit. Luckily, because he probably won't get another assignment like that for some time, given his indiscretion. Needless to say, John was treated like an outcast at work. Normally friendly co-workers physically shrank if he sat down next to them. No one talked to him except in response to a direct work-related question. His boss would call him into his office and berate him for his complete lack of moral ethics and ask why he should stay on at the firm, given his poor judgment and reliability. His boss had been married for 45 years, and it was difficult for him to hide his contempt for a man who so easily disregarded his marriage vows. He notified John that he would be fired as soon as the divorce was finalized. This gave John 2 months to try to find another job, which was nearly impossible in a neighborhood where gossip raged. Meanwhile, interesting things were happening in the Webb household, to say the least. For some reason, Ellie's car had been repaired for an unusually long time. Every week the mechanic would call and give some technical reason why the car wasn't ready. This meant that Ellie was more than happy to use the local bus service. It also meant that the relationship between John and Ellie was becoming unusually strained. For a couple who were used to regular entertainment in an unstressed environment, every attempt to meet at lunchtime was fraught with danger. They could not go to their usual hotel. The receptionist called about their no-show and informed John that the usual reservation would be canceled. This meant that their secret meetings would have to take place in the hospital storerooms. These rooms were cramped, smelling of all sorts of chemicals, and with the added danger of being broken into at any moment by a maintenance worker. One day they were jumped on by a contract worker who opened the door and saw them having fun. He quickly closed the door, but opened it again 10 seconds later, putting his phone on videotape. The exit from that storeroom was almost instantaneous and never happened again. The contract worker happened to recognize a nurse, who recognized another, and so on. The video circulated freely, but never made it to Ellie's or John's phones. It did, however, make it onto mine. This file was added to the others in my cheater folder. I, for my part, maintained a calm, relaxed demeanor at home. Fortunately, the routine was long established, and maintaining a semblance of normalcy was easier than I thought. The only difference was that there was absolutely no physical interaction between Ellie and me. I wondered how Allie hadn't commented on this change in our relationship, but it was obvious that her thoughts were too preoccupied with what was going on between Shelley and John. She was always on edge, obviously because of her infrequent and dangerous liaisons with John while at work. She must have wondered how no one had guessed that she was the other married woman mentioned in the divorce papers. Maybe, she thought, it was just luck. Sometimes she would stay late at work, blaming herself for the overtime. I knew she was using that time to entertain John somewhere. Although rage boiled inside me, I hid my utter contempt for Allie behind a facade of normalcy. Elaine guessed something was wrong and cornered me in the kitchen one day while I was making dinner. Ally and James weren't home yet. "Dad, are you and Mom okay? I can't help but notice that you two are nothing like each other. Mom is on edge all the time, and you two are acting so normal, it's not normal. I mean, look at what's going on with Patsy's mom and dad. I wouldn't want anything like that to happen to you. Their divorce will be finalized next week. Patsy cries all the time. Her dad is hardly ever home, and their house is going to be sold. Patsy told me that her father has been having an affair for years and that he has 2 other children with another married woman. Who is this father?" I looked at her. Good old Laney, thought I. Female intuition is alive and well in the teenage head. I replied in as calm a voice as possible. Of course it does, Lainey. You know that every couple has quiet times and difficulties, don't you? If anything happens that you need to worry about, I'll be the first to let you know. Now, don't you have to hurry up to your room like you usually do at this time? She left, but I knew that eventually I would have to tell her about her real genetic makeup. It was a task I wasn't looking forward to. How do you tell the girl who has been your daughter for the past 19 years that she really isn't? Shelley and John's divorce, of course, was to be finalized the following week. I knew this because I had been in close contact with Shelley. The attorney told her that she was in line to receive 80% of the total assets of their marriage. This would allow Shelley to start her new life quite well off. It was amazing that the process had gone so far without anyone revealing who the woman in this saga was. That helped my plan immensely. The day came when John and Shelley were finally divorced. The house was sold, and Shelley moved to a neighboring town where she found a new job and a place suitable for a single mother and her teenage daughter. Patsy accepted the situation and often came to Elaine's house for sleepovers. Patsy seemed to lean on Elaine for support, but was also very attached to her mother. If Shelley was not home when Patsy returned, she would immediately call to find out her whereabouts. Shelley and I continued to meet occasionally for friendly conversations. Our support for each other allowed us to weather the storm of deception with relative ease. The asshole lost his job as promised and ended up finding some low-paying part-time work. Now it was my turn to let the dragons loose. That Wednesday, Ellie came home from work as usual and was just about to go into the bedroom to take a shower when I called out to her. "Ellie, I know what you and John have been up to." Well, the reaction was worthy of the camera. Ellie literally froze in the middle of the stairs. She slowly turned toward me, grabbing the balustrade. Her skin turned white and she almost tripped going down the stairs. "What do you mean?" she muttered. I wasn't going to be kind. The hatred I had hidden for so long came to the surface. "I'm saying, I know you and John have been having fun behind my back for at least 19 years, I shouted. Fortunately, Elaine and James were busy playing sports. "Our entire married life you cheated on another man, had 2 of his children, and deceived me into thinking they were ours. The disrespect and deceit you have shown me is completely unfathomable. I'm not even going to ask why, because there is no answer that will satisfy me. I have been aware of your actions for the past 3.5 months. Just so you know, you will be brought here tonight at 8 o'clock sharp. I chose that time because your children, Elaine and James, will already be here and will probably have finished the dinner I have prepared as usual. I'll be leaving soon. My things are packed in the car. I'm not going back to this den of deceit again. If you need to contact me, please contact my attorney whose number is on the divorce papers. James and Elaine will likely be anxiously awaiting your explanation of what you have been up to all these years. I had hoped that I would be the one to tell them what was going on between you and John and what it meant to them, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. If I did, I knew I would lose my temper and probably say and do something that would tarnish these 2 wonderful children for life. No, you're the one who made the mess. Now you have to clean it up. I can't bear the pain and betrayal that will befall James and Elaine." All of these words were shouted out. It helped dissipate the anger. Ellie just collapsed on the steps. She moaned, "No, no." But I felt no pity for her. Moreover, I turned toward the kitchen and finished making dinner for James, Elaine, and her. I was strangely calm as I set the table and placed the 2 envelopes, one for James and one for Elaine, in their usual places. The letters inside each were the same. They read, "Dear James and Lainey, I am torn about having to put you in the position you are in. Believe me, if there was another way out, one where you wouldn't have to share my pain and embarrassment, I would choose it. Please know that from the bottom of my heart, I love you both with a love that encompasses my entire being. I have loved you from the moment you were born and have worked hard to help you develop and grow into the beautiful human beings that you are. If you need to speak to me, and I sincerely hope you do, my new number is 0223 786 712. Please do not give this number to your mother as I cannot bear to have anything to do with her. I hope the explanation she gives you doesn't break your heart like it did mine. Once again, I love you wholeheartedly. Daddy. I agonized for a long time deciding to take this step. Genetically, I was not their father. But I couldn't escape the truth that I was, in fact, their father, and had been for their entire lives. Holding back tears and sobbing quietly, I walked out of the kitchen and into the garage. Ellie was still standing on the stairs, holding her head in her arms. She was dead to me, but I hoped she would tell James and Elaine the truth. Now it was her turn to pay the ferryman for all the hurt and grief she and John had caused. I went to the small house I had rented and prepared the week before. There was room for Elaine and James if they decided to come, but I wouldn't push them. Unfortunately, that decision was ultimately up to them. As I drove, the tears flowed freely. I was afraid of getting into an accident, but I made it there safely. As I turned the key in the house that would now, and for the foreseeable future, be my home, I heard a voice behind me. Thought you could use some company, especially tonight. It was Shelley. Good old Shelley. My rock and support during these past horrible months. I collapsed into her arms and we repeated the tear fest that had started at her house 3 months ago. All the accumulated emotions, anger, hatred, disbelief, self-doubt, questions, all of it spewed out, turning me into a quivering mess. My incoherent ramblings must have seemed strange to Shelley, but she simply led me into the house, sat me down on the couch, and continued to hug me. The time that passed before I could meaningfully form 2 words is indefinable. All I muttered was, "Thank you, Shelley." She didn't let me say anything else. We got down to it. At 7 a.m., we were awakened by 2 phones calling for attention. Mine was from Elaine, and Shelley's was from Patsy. They had both been trying to contact us since last night. I answered mine. "Lainey, how are you, my love?" The sobs coming from the receiver told me all I needed to know. "I love you, Lainey. Please know that. I will always love you no matter what." Her sobs subsided. "Daddy, I love you. I'm so sad for you because of what Mom did. I don't know what to think of that bitch yet. Part of me sees Mom as she always was, and the other part of me sees her as a lying, cheating bitch who cheated everyone who loved her our whole lives. Can I see you? Where do you live now? Will I still be your daughter? I love you so much. I can't bear to be around you. James wants to see you too. Can we come now?" She sobbed into the phone. I calmed her down and promised her that I would pick them both up within the hour. I didn't mention it to Elaine, but Shelley and I had a cleaning job to do. Patsy also asked permission to see her mom and was very concerned about sitting up all night. I picked up James and Shelley outside our old house. They each had backpacks and pillows. "What are these camping supplies?" I tried to cheer them up. They both had red eyes and clearly hadn't slept well. James replied, "We can't stay there," he said, gesturing to the house, our old house. Strangely, I had already lost touch with what had been our home, our sanctuary all these years. Mom cries all the time and talks to that bastard John for hours. It was the first time I'd heard James swear, but I didn't bother to tell him off. I knew exactly how he felt. "Come on, you two. We need to go to my new house and talk." The trip to my house was strange. James stared moodily out the window the whole time, while Elaine sobbed and wiped her eyes with an endless supply of tissues. They almost ran through the front door, hurrying to be somewhere safe. Shelley was already there along with Patsy. Patsy rushed over to Elaine and hugged her tightly. "I guess we're sisters now, huh? I've always wanted a sister, and I'm so glad it's you. I wish with all my heart that it hadn't happened under these circumstances." This brought tears to my eyes and more sobs from all 3 women in the room. James seemed to stay away, so I just put my arm around his shoulders and pulled him tightly against me. "It's going to be okay, James," I tried to reassure him. The boy, bordering on adulthood, nodded his head and looked away, embarrassed that his tears were visible. Then I hugged him properly and whispered through my own tears, You will always be my son, James, no matter what happens. I'm proud of you, and I always want to be by your side. He sobbed once more and also whispered with difficulty, Thank you, Daddy. My heart clung to him, and we hugged for a long time more. Shelley realized the moment had arrived, bless her heart, and loudly declared, Well, now that the family hugging and sobbing is over, can we all go to the table and enjoy a real family meal? The pizza and drinks she laid out allowed us all to take a break and gather our thoughts. A light afternoon of relaxing in the backyard followed. We didn't talk about the strange reasons we ended up together, but we joked a lot about the new siblings. Shelley and I marveled at how blended their children were, but were also keenly aware that I am not their genetic father, and she is not the genetic mother of James and Elaine. The looks of quiet sadness that flashed between us were few, overwhelmed by the happiness she and I had so recently shared. As usual, night fell, and Shelley and Patsy went home, leaving me alone with Elaine and James. Did you guys let Mom know you were staying here? I asked. On top of everything else, I didn't want the police coming here looking for missing kids. Yeah, James answered. We left her a note. We asked her not to call us. The anger built up in him again. I knew it was my job to normalize his relationship with Ellie, or this would gnaw at him forever. Elaine, James, I know you're both hurting. Believe me when I tell you that my anger at this situation almost killed me. I seriously considered ending this pain for good, but the only thing that kept me sane and focused was you two. What your mother did, she did mostly to me. I'm the one she swore an oath of marriage to. I'm the one she betrayed more than anything else. She is still your mother, and when the dust settles and you have time to think things through, you will realize that she was a wonderful mother to both of you. Her acts of betrayal and deceit have not affected her love and care for you. Until now. Don't lose all those years of happiness because of that. They both listened. It was obvious that they didn't want to agree to treat their mother with respect. Elaine spoke up. I know, Dad. Can I still call you Daddy? I'm just so angry about what she did to you. I feel your pain as much as my own because of her betrayal. Listen to both of you. I know I'm not your genetic father, but there's no way I'm going to be your father. My relationship with you will not change. My relationship with your mother, on the other hand, is a different matter. I will always be there for you, just as I was before. The living conditions may be a little different, I grinned, but I will be there for you. I paused. Yoda to the rescue, thought I. Now enough talking for one night. Go and choose the room that will be yours if you stay here. Unfortunately, it is not as lush and luxurious as our old one, but I want it to be a home. Now go, and good night. I love you both. They settled down for the night. I really needed to do the same. This emotional roller coaster was seriously messing with my head and body. Besides, I'm not young anymore, and the antics with Shelley last night had tired me out almost to the point of exhaustion. I wonder how Shelley is feeling. And that was my last conscious thought as my head collapsed onto the pillow and I disappeared into the endless country. The next morning at breakfast, I convinced them both to talk to Ellie. She was clearly very worried about them, but during the tense conversation, the kids let her know that they would come home as long as that asshole didn't go anywhere. They made it clear that they wanted nothing to do with John. I don't know if John stayed with Ellie, but she agreed. I drove them home just before lunch and made sure there were no unauthorized cars nearby. Fortunately, my arrangement with the mechanic who had been looking after Ellie's car for so long was over, and she now had her car back. The kids came into the house after a long hug and my promises that I would be there for them anytime. They knew my number. I was due to start work again, and I hoped the kids would make up with Ellie. She started to leave the house as the kids walked in. Al, we need to... I didn't let her finish. I closed the window and backed out of the driveway as fast as I could. There was no way I was going to get into a conversation with that bitch, even though I knew I would have to at some point, just for the sake of the kids. I would have to talk to the lawyer again. Jane was very frank when I saw her. Al, as hard as it may seem, John has every right to your children. And I mean your children, metaphorically. After all, he is their genetic father. As unfair as that may be, the law is the law. Elaine is her own boss now. She's 19, and by law she can live with whomever she wants, if she wants to at all. James is 14. The law says he needs a guardian until he's 16. You and Ellie will have to agree, but she doesn't have to let you look after James. She is his mother, and John is his legal father. You're the one who's a stranger here. Of course I knew all this, but hearing it out loud only increased my despair at the situation. She continued, "Let's give the divorce a go, and then we'll see." The divorce did go through, and as expected, no child support was requested. I received 40% of the marital assets, which surprised Jane. She had expected me to receive much less. Elaine moved in with me permanently, but occasionally spent a few nights with Ellie. A quiet, uneasy truce had developed between them. I was happy for Elaine, but still seething with anger that Ellie seemed to have the upper hand in this whole mess. John lived in our old house with Ellie and James. He knew he shouldn't be there when Elaine was there. Somehow he had managed to buy a luxury apartment to live in when he wasn't living with Ellie. Elaine informed me that James had become a real recluse and lived in his room almost all the time. He would not eat with Ellie and John and would only come out of his shell when Elaine was around. His relationship with Ellie was abhorrent. He barely managed to be civil to her. He spoke only when he was spoken to directly and always responded with one-word, meaningless phrases. With John, he didn't speak at all. Combined with his usual teenage rebelliousness, he was a ticking time bomb. "I'm very worried about him, Dad," Elaine confided to me one day. "If he doesn't settle down soon, he's going to do something he'll regret forever. He's hanging out with the wrong people at school, and he's starting to annoy all his teachers. My friends who are still in school say he's completely neglected his studies. What can we do, Dad?" I looked sadly at my daughter. "Lainey, I've tried everything I can, but the justice system is rigged against us. Legally, he's not my child, and I have no power over him. But I'll let you know what other plans I have." I said this with a conspiratorial look in my eyes. Elaine listened and smiled as I laid out my plans for the asshole. He's going to be in a lot of pain, and when I'm done with him, he might want to leave town for good. Something I was able to find out through clever means, but not that clever since the private investigator was duly paid. Apparently, when divorcing Shelley, asshole John wasn't exactly forthcoming about all of his assets. He kept an offshore account and had been siphoning money out of it for years. It made a little more sense how he was able to buy that condo so easily after his divorce from Shelley. The detective couldn't establish where the money came from. He opened this account with a solid $200,000 given to him by some distant relative. He never disclosed this to the court. However, the detective was able to find out that the current balance was about $1 million. "And the bastard screwing Ellie over," I growled. "I bet he didn't tell Ellie about that either. No wonder he could afford to book their shack for so long without guessing about Shelley's regular payments." The detective also managed to detail the fictitious name he used for the account to fool all the investigators during the divorce proceedings. James Long. That's the name he used. Bastard. That private investigator I hired was worth his weight in gold. Questions about how this private detective was able to figure it all out haunted me. The detective also felt that he must have somehow accessed this account from his computer or smartphone because, to his knowledge, he had never visited a foreign bank office. He had a safety deposit box at a local bank, but he rarely visited it. This was getting interesting. Elaine was on board and probably wanted to burn the bastard more than I did. Elaine was on a mission. She had to find out how this asshole was accessing his lucrative accounts outside the bank. She was starting to spend more time with Ellie, which meant the asshole wasn't home as often. It was becoming a headache for him, because every time he went God knows where, he had to take all his personal belongings with him, computer reading and all. After a while, he got lazy and left his computer at Ellie's. This was the moment Elaine and I had been waiting for. She called me as soon as she realized she was in trouble. "Dad, he's gone and his laptop stayed at my place." What am I supposed to do now? I don't know his password or anything, she said, panting. I'll pick you up in 15, I said. But make sure your mom doesn't find out you're leaving or that asshole will be back. She told Ellie she was going to her room and didn't want to be disturbed for at least 3 hours. That was all it took. We had about 2.5 hours to burn the asshole. Elaine met me on the next street over from our old house, and I immediately drove to the address I had researched weeks before. I didn't know its occupant, but had emailed him about a job I wanted to do. I knocked on the door and was answered by an unshaven, pimply-faced kid in his early 20s. What do you need, Grandpa? He replied through the slightly ajar door. Screw Grandpa, I replied. My name is Al, and I organized this some time ago. Are we in or out? He seemed hesitant, but seeing Elaine behind me, reluctantly let us in. So, can you do what you said? Or are you complete shit? I asked. Easy, man, he replied. Just give me an hour, and this laptop will sing to us. He took the laptop and plugged USB cables and HDMI cables into it. For what reason, I didn't know. The only thing I did know was that he promised to unlock all the password-protected files on the hard drive. That's why I ended up here. It wasn't cheap, but if he succeeded, my plan to burn the asshole would succeed. While he hummed and ahed without addressing anyone in particular, Elaine and I looked around the apartment. This was not a life I could live. The apartment was a mess. Pieces and scraps of appliances were lying everywhere. Pizza leftovers were lying in various places throughout the apartment. The only place to sit comfortably was in front of a huge set of monitors. At the moment, the screens were displaying the login screen of the asshole's laptop, along with some scrolling code. It went on like this for about 40 minutes, when the technician yelled out, "Bingo! We're in!" The login screen changed to the asshole's home screen. We went straight to his web browser and checked the bookmarks he had set. Sure enough, 2 layers down was the Bank of Greece tab. That's what we clicked on. The login window to that site appeared, and the usual scrolling code was activated on the technician's screens. Again, after about 50 minutes, the login screen filled with characters. We had his login. I quickly logged in and found his account information. Sure enough, there was $900,000 plus change in this account. I transferred all but $10 to an account that was already open. It was opened in the name of K. Hader. I wondered if he would get the clue. We continued searching his hard drive and found the safe deposit box details as well. After writing them down, I paid the tech guy and left. We had limited time to get the asshole's laptop back. Elaine came back and replaced the laptop. She then informed Ellie that she was leaving again. We waited around the corner and noticed the asshole driving back to Allie's place almost immediately after Elaine left the house. God, that was fast, thought I. He must have been just around the corner. Back at my house, I pondered what had happened. The asshole must have gotten into some questionable shit to have that much cash. He was just an ordinary accountant. Questions about how and why he was hiding money offshore while living a seemingly ordinary life in the suburbs flooded my mind. There must be some reason why he was hiding everything. But hiding it from whom? The tax department had managed to make deals with most foreign banks to keep citizens from hiding cash overseas, so he must have known that sooner or later the government would discover it. If my private investigator could find them so easily, so could the government. I should have done more research. Maybe there were answers in the safety deposit box. And that's where Elaine came in. I was working as a teacher again, so I didn't have much time to investigate. She went to the bank in the city where the safe deposit box was located. She had all the security passwords from the asshole's computer, so she hoped that would be enough. I'm sure if it had been a middle-aged man in my shoes, they would have asked all the questions they could. But Elaine was a nearly 20-year-old beauty. She dressed to her heels and knew how to show what she had. My daughter had grown up, and I felt a prick of regret that she had lost her childhood. But it worked. She managed to sweet-talk me through the first level of security by telling me about her stepfather being in the hospital, the fact that she had all the other passwords, etc. was enough to get her through. When she opened the box, it contained only a few accounting journals and an envelope full of smaller items. Not wanting to push her luck, she quickly put everything in her purse and walked out of the bank. As she did so, she smiled sweetly and leaned slightly in front of the guard, pretending to check her bag. He caught a glimpse of her cleavage, a memory that would last all day. The contents of the box were spread out on my kitchen table when I returned from school after lunch. Elaine looked pale and very worried. "Daddy, you won't believe what was in the box. Here, look." She put 2 passports in my hand. Opening the first one, I saw that it was for an asshole, but the passport was in the name of Bruce Williams. It was an Australian passport. The second one had Ellie's typical passport picture, but it was in the name of Anne Williams, Mrs. Anne Williams, also an Australian passport. What the hell? I remembered that my daughter was there. It looks like he was planning some sort of escape. He was planning to disappear with your mother, Elaine. The divorce must have disrupted their plans for a while. Look at that. 2 Qantas plane tickets from Los Angeles to Sydney, one way, and that was planned 2 weeks in advance. Of course, your mom wasn't on one of those. She did some stupid things, but I'm sure she wouldn't have left you and James. There's something more going on here. Elaine was dumbfounded by such revelations, but continued to go through the contents of the envelope scattered across the table. "Dad, I think this picture is interesting. It shows an asshole. She started calling him that now, but when he was about my age. Take a look." I looked at the picture and immediately recognized the man in it. It was during our college years. It showed an asshole looking very suave and confident. Standing next to him was another student I remembered. Suddenly, it hit me who it was. Holy shit! My daughter was momentarily oblivious. That's Jimmy Lamont. He was the son of the famous, or should I say infamous gang leader Al Lamont. Nobody liked him at the university. He threw money around, harassed any girl he liked. Now, the asshole was good friends with him. He must have been good at hiding it because I never saw any sign of it. And I certainly never saw any indication that he and your mother were close at university. I must have been a naive dolt. After looking through most of the contents of the envelope, I focused on the journals. They looked like regular ledgers, boring. The entries showed regular cash deposits and withdrawals into an account in J. Lamont's name. He must have been doing the bookkeeping for this crime ring, I said. The other journal was more cryptic. It showed only deposits, except for one very large withdrawal recently. A apartment, thought I. This account listed none other than James Long. It was the same account we had just raided. Either that asshole was regularly paid $10,000 for his clandestine bookkeeping, or he had stolen money from Jimmy's account. Either way, the pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit together. Elaine, we've disturbed an ant's nest. This could lead to huge trouble for us if we get caught, but especially for the asshole and your mother. I don't care about the asshole at all, but your mother is another matter. I know I hate her with a passion. Sorry, Lainey, but I wouldn't wish her dead. Rumor has it that this crime family is pretty determined to deal with anyone who crosses them. We need to proceed with caution. Elaine turned pale again. Do you think they know it was us? She whispered. I had the same thought. I hope not, I replied. I knew we needed to cover our tracks, and as quickly as possible. I took the diaries to school and had the teacher's aide make 2 copies of them. I also copied the passports. Elaine put the originals back in the safe deposit box. However, Ellie's fake passport and the airplane voucher stayed with me. This time, the young guard smiled sweetly at Elaine and stared at the beautiful woman standing before him with anticipation. However, this time to no avail. Elaine and I discussed what we should do. Her mother was in great danger. If Al Lamont found out that this asshole was stealing from him, his days would be numbered. Unfortunately, Ellie could or would be collateral damage. She needed to separate from him as soon as possible so that there would be no connection between them. Little chance of that, thought I wryly. They've been partying and living in a secret marriage behind my back for longer than me and Ellie have been together. The asshole had to go, and Ellie had to disappear. One copy of the diaries was supposed to show up in Al's mailbox. Ellie had to disappear under her assumed name as soon as possible. How could I get her to agree? I called her. She didn't answer right away, no doubt perplexed as to why I'd called her, given that I'd steadfastly refused to return her calls since our divorce. Alan, it's a surprise, she replied hesitantly. Ellie, we need to talk right away. It's about James, I lied. No questions right now, but meet me at Bean's Coffee in 15 minutes. I hung up before her questions started. When she walked in, she was pale. What is it with Alan? She began. Did something happen to James? What did he do? I gestured for her to sit down. Without a word, I placed her fake passport open on the table. She glanced at it, and realizing it was her picture, quickly looked up at me. What is this, Alan? What are you playing at? That's not my passport. Where did you get it? I waited for her to finish her questions. At least she seemed as surprised as I was at the existence of the forged document. Without another word, I placed 2 airline tickets on the table. They were the originals. Looks like that asshole wanted you both gone, Mrs. Williams. She turned even paler than before. What? How? I would never abandon my children. I know they've been hell since our divorce from Alan, but I still love them. They're John's kids, too. He couldn't just pick them up and leave them. When she said the last word, she bit her tongue. It was the first time she'd openly admitted to me that the kids weren't mine. Are you really sticking up for that cheating asshole? My anger began to rise to the surface. That lying, conniving asshole who willingly cuckolded me with your help for 19 years. You expect me to believe he has morals. At this point, I was already yelling, and the other customers were blatantly ogling me. Ellie had never seen me in such a frenzy before, and it was freaking her out. I'm leaving, she declared. As she started to get up, I put the magazines on the table. What are these? She asked. Forged documents again? I asked her to look at them carefully. She immediately realized what they were. She had always been the one to keep an eye on our finances. Ellie, I said more calmly, it looks like that asshole cheated on you too. He stole from the wrong person. There's a certain justice in that from my point of view, but it doesn't make me feel better. This nice man, John, aka asshole, has not only entertained you behind my back all these years, but he's been financially screwing Al Lamont all this time. I'm sure Al will soon find out what he's been up to, and if you're still with him or near him, well, let's just say you could be in deep shit. All his lackeys and their friends, and if you don't end up in some Mexican brothel as white flavor of the month, you can see the Mexican desert from under your feet. I let that sink in. I didn't think it was possible, but she turned even more pale. Now the other customers were really concerned. The waitress, noticing Ellie's concern, approached her. Are you all right, lady? Can I get you anything? Getting no response from Allie, the waitress walked away in confusion. Ellie, I'm not going to beat around the bush. You need to disappear to Australia pronto. Use a fake passport and a flight voucher. Leave without looking back. The Lamonts know you're with a jerk, and they always have. Again, the bile rose at the thought of how these two had lied to me for so long. You have to give me custody of James and put the house, our old house, to James and Elaine in trust. I have the papers right here. I placed the last yellow envelope on the table. Make no mistake about it, Ellie. I'm offering you a way out, and not because I have any feelings for you. No, that's wrong. I have feelings for you. She looked at me in surprise. Alan, I don't... she began. I interrupted her. I have hatred for you, pure, unadulterated hatred and disgust. How you had the nerve to do this to me, to our marriage, to our children, I will never understand. You treated my love and respect for you with utter contempt. No, I'm giving you a way out because you are James and Elaine's mother, and I love them dearly. They deserve to have their mother alive, not dead in some Mexican ditch after being used and abused by anyone. I don't care what happens to this asshole. I hope they leave him in some Mexican desert. Now sign the papers and get out of the country and out of our lives. Last chance. Ellie took the papers, read them, and signed. Alan, this means I have no claim to my children, she sobbed. Welcome to the club, bitch. Now you know how I felt when I found out about your years of deception. I stood up and walked out of the caf. See. The patrons breathed a sigh of relief, but still looked at the sobbing woman who was still sitting in her seat. The next day, James came to my house with all his gear. Hey, Dad, what's going on? Mom left a note on the table for me to come here and expect me to stay here for a long time. Most of her stuff is gone. It's like she's not coming back. I looked at James, my James, and smiled. It's okay, son. Everything will be explained soon. Go and unpack. Elaine jumped up, hugged her brother, and helped him put things away. 2 days later, the newspapers reported the sudden disappearance of recently divorced local resident John Jefferson. There were rumors that he was somehow connected to a known criminal mastermind. The investigation is ongoing. Also on the next page was an article about a mysterious house fire. We knew the address. It was our old house. Apparently, the fire was the result of a botched burglary, and it was obvious that the house had been completely trashed before being burned. James and Elaine continued to live in my house until Elaine went to university. Coincidentally, Patsy, her sister, also went there. Shelley sold her house and moved in with us. We were delighted that James often went to bed at night with headphones on, listening to his favorite bands. The money stayed in our offshore account and sat there until we needed it. Teachers don't make that much. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.